everyone. Welcome back. I'm Michael Sandler, your host on Inspire Nation. If you've ever wanted to communicate better, then do we have the Say What You Mean show for you. Today I'll be talking with Oren Jay Sofer, retreat and workshop leader on mindful communication, a member of the Spirit Rock Teachers Council, and the author of a beautiful new book on mindfulness and nonviolent communication skills, Say What You Mean. And that's just what I want to talk with him about today, about how to find your voice, speak your truth, and listen deeply. That, plus we'll talk about how to kill a chair at your grandmother's. The importance of EATOREN, a blue Schwinn with a red seat and red handlebars, Marshall Rosenberg and a baby giraffe, giggling toddlers and puppies, and what in the world the Tao and Winnie the Pooh have to do with anything. So welcome to the show, Oren. Are you ready to shine?
Indeed. Thanks so much for having me, Michael. It's great to be here.
Oh, it's so great to have you here as well, and a mighty woohoo for being on the show. So, before we dive right into things, what does EATOREN have to do with anything?
Yes, absolutely. Well, that spells eat, Oren, which is what my dear parents used to say to me when I was a little kid at the dinner table when they couldn't get me to stop talking. And my plate of food was sitting in front of me. So I was a very talkative child, and I've had a fascination and a love for language since I was a little kid. And so, but what's interesting about that was, early in my childhood, I was very talkative and gregarious. And then at a certain point, one of my family members got ill with some very difficult mental challenges, and things changed really dramatically in the family. And there was a lot of pressure and difficult emotions. And so that kind of bright, shining gregariousness, got pulled in because there was so much turmoil in the family system. And so I went from having this experience of feeling like I could share my voice openly and freely and say whatever I want, to actually feeling like there wasn't any space for me. And like I had to almost disappear in order to fit in and make sure that everything was okay in the family. So I then had to work very hard as a young adult to find my voice again. So that EATOREN was a really important touchstone for me in remembering that capacity to be free and authentic and speak my truth.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing on that. I'm curious. I don't know exactly when you started getting interested in Buddhism, but you said such a profound word earlier, and the two can't help but be inextricably linked. Space. You couldn't find the space. And I'm guessing at some point you started to begin looking, maybe without realizing it, for the inner space.
Absolutely. Yeah. That was in college. I was 18, 19. And, my personal world was kind of falling apart. My folks were getting divorced. I was doing a lot of drugs. I had a big falling out with my friends, and my girlfriend relationship ended. So it was kind of one of those times in life, looking back and knowing now what we live through as adults when things get hard, none of those were, that life shattering. But for a young 18 and 19-year-old at the time, it was really difficult. And so I started looking for something else to find some more ground inside, because it felt like the ground was falling away.
How did you end up, and where did you get the, forgive the term, chutzpah, to go to a monastery in India at 19?
Well, that's where the Tao of Pooh comes in, which you mentioned in your introduction. So, when I was in high school in Jersey, I picked up this little book that I saw that the librarian had put out, called The Tao of Pooh by Benjamin Hoff. And it's a great read. And it really spoke to me. I felt like here are these ideas that I feel like I've known were true my whole life, but no one ever said them. And so that really planted a seed in me around Asian thought and Eastern traditions and religions. And so when I was in college, I ended up studying Buddhism and Asian religion. And when everything started falling apart, various factors started pointing to India. I had a professor who was an Indiophile and showed us all these slides from his trips to India. And he was so enthusiastic and on fire about India that it planted in me the seed of like, oh, gee, I think that sounds cool. I want to go there. And some friends had traveled to India and had really powerful, life-changing experiences. So with all of this stuff happening in my life and also the drugs and the kind of the busyness, I was also an actor. I was a child actor. So I was running around New York City, going to auditions and, stretched pretty thin. And I heard about this study abroad program. No sex, no drugs, no alcohol. Wake up at 5 a.m. to meditate every day. And my heart, I was at, sign me up, I wanted to kind of clear the decks. And so that's kind of what pointed me in that direction, was this deep need for a kind of a soul searching to reset things inside.
I'm very curious, coming from good Jewish parents myself.
Oh,
What did your
yes.
folks say when you said you're going to go off to India?
Oh, dear, Michael. They were not pleased. Yeah. We're sending our son to Columbia University for this.
Why have I heard this?
Yeah. So that was the beginning of a very, it's actually quite appropriate that you ask, because that was the beginning of a very difficult time for me with my family, with my parents, because going to India was really just the beginning. It changed my life. It did. It's just to the point where when I came back, literally people did not recognize me. I grew out a beard, my hair got really long, and that started, I gave up my acting career. I became Buddhist. I was meditating every day and burning incense and lighting candles and chanting. And, here my mom is kind of, shaking inside, my son is worshiping idols, which is not the case. But why it's relevant is that this played no small role in why I looked for these communication skills, was because I have a really close relationship with my folks and I love them very dearly. And it was very painful to feel so much difficulty and separation from them, and also not to be able to share with them this path that I was so excited about and was bringing me so much joy.
Yeah.
So I sought out these communication skills, and my relationships with both my mother and my father, which today are great, were a real training ground for me in learning how to find my voice, speak my truth, and listen deeply, really hear what was in their hearts and what their concerns were.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing on that. If we go back to your earliest times, there's somebody who I think helped influence you to actually be more present and listening and hearing what's inside of you as well. Godwin, forgive me on this last name, Samararatne.
Really close. Good work. Samararatne. Yeah, Godwin. What a beautiful man Godwin was. So he was a Sri Lankan man, layperson, but he lived like a monastic. He wore all white, mostly self-taught. He didn't have a meditation teacher. He touched many people around the world with his meditation practice and his teaching. Really beautiful, gentle man. I'll just tell you one story, two stories. So one is in the book, the other one isn't. One of the things he used to say that has stayed with me all these years, forgive me for repeating his accent. This is definitely not culturally appropriate, but it's done with the utmost love and respect, and it's really not possible to transmit the love in his voice without me kind of remembering and hearing the lilt and the sound of his words. So he would say to us frequently during that program in India so many years ago, he'd say, "Sometimes when I don't feel so good, I like to say to myself in a very gentle way, it's okay to not feel okay. It's okay to not feel okay." And that's not a message that we get in our culture or society today. And it's one of the most important ones that we need to hear. That those feelings inside that are frightening or painful or difficult or scary, that's our shared humanity. And those hold a precious gift for us when we're able to meet them and hold them with tenderness. And so he really taught me something about that. And he taught me something about listening. When I was over there in India, I was feeling really homesick, in a lot of emotional pain. And I went to see him to talk to him. And I was sharing with him about how hard of a time I was having. And he listened. He listened very carefully. And then he asked me at one point, he said, "Where does it hurt? Where does it hurt?" And I never thought about that. And I listened and I felt inside, and it hurt kind of in my chest and in my throat. And I pointed there, and I felt this wave of pain come up to the surface. I felt a knot in my throat and a few tears, this kind of heat in my face. A few tears fell, and then it passed. And I felt lighter inside. And at the time, I thought he had done something magical. I was like, whoa, this guy's so amazing. He just took away my pain. And it wasn't until, some years later, I'm a little embarrassed to admit how long it took me to realize what had actually happened, which was that just through his presence and compassion, he created the space for me. There's that word again, space for me. To feel what was true and to allow it to be felt and known and to go on its way, which is the nature of our experience. Things come, they're known, and they pass if we don't interfere.
Thank you so much for sharing. And on both of those things, it's interesting. We have such a beautiful self-help audience, but we can also often get too wrapped up in the positive thought movement. Interesting, because Rick Hansen is such a dear gentleman, but we can get wrapped up in, I can only think, it's law of attraction. I can only think positive thoughts. What I think about is what I bring about. And Rick would agree, what you stuff down is what comes up and erupts.
Right. And all of the stuff that Rick talks about, that positive psychology focuses on, is essential. I mean, that need to develop resilience, that forms the ground, right, from which we're able to meet those difficult emotions. And when we don't have that inner ground, that's what friends and teachers are for. And that's why in that moment, Godwin was so powerful and important for me, because I didn't have the resources. I didn't have the stability, the kindness, the spaciousness inside. And so he offered that to me. So that's all of those practices. And I talk about this some in the book, the need for really playing to our strengths, starting small and building up the strength to work towards those more difficult emotions and situations.
Speaking about strength and compassion, how did you end up at a retreat with Thich Nhat Hanh? And what's right speech?
Yeah. So many of your listeners probably know who Thich Nhat Hanh is, renowned Zen master, poet, and peace activist who started a whole tradition here in the West. Really beautiful man and author of so many wonderful books. So when I came back from India in my early 20s, I started attending as many meditation retreats as I could, and just learning, just soaking it up. And one of his books had a strong impact on me. So when I heard he was going to be teaching a retreat on the East Coast in, I think it was Vermont, near where I was, signed me up. So this was in the late 90s, and went to the retreat. And so I don't think I go into this level of detail in the book, but I'll share with you and your listeners out there. So at the end of the retreat, there's this opportunity to take what are called the 5 mindfulness trainings, or the 5 precepts, these are the guidelines for living a happy, meaningful life on the Buddhist path. And they're to not kill, to not destroy life, to not steal, to not cause harm with our sexual energy, to not cause harm with our words, which is right speech, and also to not take intoxicants that cloud the mind and make us do all those other things. We lose our judgment. So, at the core, these are about living with a sense of kindness, care, and conscience, moral conscience, so that we don't cause harm in our life. And so right speech is the practice of taking care with our words. And so at the end, they take this process of committing to the 5 mindfulness trainings, as they call them, very seriously. And so I thought about it long and hard with each of these, and I felt like, I was down to not cause harm, but they do a very deep investigation. So when they talk about not killing, they talk about being vegetarian or not participating in activities that that cause life to be killed. When they talk about not stealing, they talk about, our economic behavior, right? Investing in funds that maybe appropriate resources that belong to future generations. So they really, really have a refined understanding. And so when I looked at each of these, I said, yeah, I'm not gonna, intentionally kill, but I can't take this to the full level that they're asking me to. And I had a lot of integrity, and I said, I'm not going to sign up for something that I'm actually not able at this point to fully do, including the intoxicants. I was still smoking pot and kind of dabbling in some of that. And but right speech. When I heard about right speech, I said, that's something I want to do. I said, that's something I can sign up for. And I'll see if I can remember from memory the way that they phrase it. It was so powerful, and it really set me on this path in a very profound way of integrating mindfulness and spiritual practice into relationships and communication. So it goes something like this. Knowing the suffering that comes from unmindful speech and the inability to listen, I am committed to cultivating loving speech and deep listening in order to bring joy and happiness to others. Knowing that words can create happiness or suffering, I am determined to speak truthfully with words that inspire self-confidence, joy, and hope. I won't spread news that I don't know to be certain. I won't criticize or condemn things of which I'm not sure. I will refrain from uttering words that can cause division or discord, or words that can cause the family or community to break. And here's the kicker. I am determined to make all efforts to reconcile and resolve all conflicts, however small. So this deep and thorough commitment to taking care with our words, and not only not causing harm, but really looking at the intentions, the impact, and seeing, how can I clean up any messes that I've made, however small.
Boy, did you have a phone call or two to make after that one.
Yeah.
Such beautiful words, and I pulled out a few salient points for fun. Loving speech and deep listening.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, and those are when we think about communication, right? Communication is speaking and listening, which includes our writing and our reading. So loving speech that comes from the heart, speech that's gentle and pleasing to hear, that's endearing, that's uplifting. In the Dhammapada, one of the core texts in the Buddhist tradition, the Buddha is quoted as having said, "Better than 1,000 useless words is one word which brings peace." So loving speech is speech that comes from the heart. Speech that comes from the heart goes to the heart. And then deep listening, recognizing that, we all want to be seen and heard and understood. And particularly when we're in pain or when we're struggling, when we're having a hard time, being met with empathy can be so healing, so helpful and uplifting. And that's a gift that we can offer to one another. And when we start practicing it, we recognize that, in the day-to-day, it doesn't actually take that much more effort or energy to really listen. Challenging situations are different, but just when we're going about our day, to really show up and give someone our full attention and full presence, it doesn't take that much more. And not only is it nourishing and helpful for the other person, but it actually is rewarding for us because we feel more present, we feel more connected, we feel more satisfied inside. And so loving speech and deep listening, these are the two sides of communication, being able to speak openly and honestly without blame, being able to listen deeply with empathy to others. But underneath both of these, and this from the book, the whole first part of the book is focused on, both of these rest upon an unseen foundation in communication. And that is our capacity to be aware and present with another human being. And this is the aspect of communication that's so often overlooked and not taught, which is how do we really show up, right? So we can meditate, we can be quiet, we can feel our breath or track, what's happening in our mind or our body or visualize things and get really present. But what happens when our eyes are open and we're talking, listening, speaking, engaging, arguing with somebody else? Does it all go out the window? This is what inspired me and set me on this path, was recognizing that these things that I'm contacting in my meditation practice aren't fully translating into my day to day. And so when we're able to bring more presence and awareness into our conversations and relationships, there's a whole range of really potent benefits. One of the primary ones being that we have more choice, right? The more aware we are, the more choice we have. We can start to actually navigate and steer wisely in a conversation.
Thank you. And that choice comes from the pause, which is coming back full circle, space. When we bring that space to the conversation, that space to listen, that space to, you have an acronym later in the book from a dear friend, I believe it is, of yours, to stop before you say anything. 4 letters. It'll come.
Wait.
Thank you.
Yeah, wait. Yeah, which I didn't do. I didn't wait for you to remember.
That's okay. Speaking
Why?
of...
Yeah.
Go for it.
What am I thinking?
Yes.
Why am I talking? Yeah. To wait. That's it's a, I don't know who actually originated that. I heard it from Sylvia Boorstein, but it's a common one in the communication world. And what's so interesting about this aspect of space? Space is one of the 5 elements in the Buddhist cosmology: earth, air, water, fire, and space. And then there's 2 more: consciousness and nibbana, enlightenment, awakening. These the unconditioned element. Space and conversation is essential. You can't have a conversation without silence. There's no sound without silence. And so one of the things, pausing is a very powerful practice, a very simple practice, but very powerful practice for bringing more awareness and choice and connection into our conversations and relationships. It doesn't need to be a long pause. Just like that, just half a breath can be a short pause. But one of the things that people often say when they hear this is, well, Oren, what about in conversations when I'm speaking with someone who, as soon as I pause, even before I pause, right, they interrupt? Like there is no space. They take over. I'm afraid if I pause that I'll lose my place in the conversation. This is a really important question. And there are 2 key things here. So the first is that one of the things that we cultivate and that we learn how to access through our contemplative practice is that experience of spaciousness inside. So much of our suffering, so much of our stress and pressure that we experience in life is self-generated. Not all of it, but a large degree of it. The amount of pressure that we put on ourselves. And so if we can learn how to notice the space that's already present, even in a conversation where there's a lot happening, there's always space. There's the space around us. There's the space in the room. There's other sounds happening. So, and I talk about some of the tools to expand your awareness in a conversation in the book. How to widen your attention to include a larger field of space to hold the intensity or the pace of a difficult conversation. So finding ways to access that space internally is one tool, and tuning into it externally as well. The other thing around pausing is that we can insert a pause by asking for it. By letting the other person know, there's a lot happening. I think I need a moment to just gather my thoughts, right? Or what you said is really important. I want to just take that in for a moment. And then if we're afraid that the person's going to start speaking, we can use nonverbal cues to maintain the silence in the space. Things like taking a deep audible breath, which is its own kind of expression, or we're pausing. We're not actually saying anything, but we're holding the floor. We're making sure that we still have the mic, right? And not giving it away, but we're buying ourselves time in the conversation.
I love it. And one of the things when we talk about space and buying ourselves time in the conversation is going to the breath. Just the very act of slowing your own breathing. In fact, chances are if they're paying any attention to you, they may actually start to mirror it, but finding the space in your breath can
Yeah,
change everything, can't it?
it can, absolutely. And one of the things I think that you're pointing to, Michael, is, we are deeply relational creatures. We affect one another. That's in our wiring. And I know Rick talks about this a lot. He and I are friends. We live not far from each other. Um, Rick Hansen talks about this a lot in terms of resilience, that, connection is one of the most powerful resources for resilience, that and meaning in life for human beings. So because we are so deeply relational, because we feel things, we have mirror neurons, we're social creatures, we're constantly evaluating where we stand in relation to others, we can get pulled into someone else's trip, for lack of a more technical word, right? Someone else is really anxious, or, rushing, or they're angry. Because we're relational, we feel it, we pick up on it. And if we haven't developed the capacity to hold our center, we can get pulled into that. And so the breath is one tool for that. And this is an essential skill in conversation, because our attention tends to get pulled out through our eyes, through the words, out into the other person and the space around us. So a lot of the initial practices of grounding our awareness and our attention in the body, learning to bring our center back in and down, and developing that capacity to feel really grounded, to feel a core of strength and presence. And I talk about this in the book, and also provide some guided meditations that go along with the book in order to develop this capacity.
Beautiful. And on that note, then, Dr. Peter A. Levine and the somatic experiencing.
Yeah. What a remarkable contribution he's made to healing. So, Peter Levine, for those of your listeners who don't know who he is, he was a biologist working at UC Berkeley, studying animals in the wild, and he realized and discovered, animals generally, particularly animals in the wild, don't get traumatized. They don't suffer from trauma when they have any kind of life-threatening, dangerous, or traumatic event, right? They have this healing process that they go through. A deer or antelope that's in a chase, that's chased by a predator, even if it gets partly attacked, but gets away to safety. Once it's safe, it will go find a quiet place to rest. It will curl up and lie down. It will wait. And then it will go through this process of shaking and twitching, and its legs kind of running, but lying there, and release all of the chemicals and the pent-up energy that was stimulated in that event. And as human beings, we share that same deep ancient biological wiring, but our social conditioning often prevents us from allowing it to happen, right? When someone's crying, what happens? The people around them try to comfort them, say, don't cry, it'll be okay, right? And so we inhibit that natural process of release and integration. And this is where trauma comes from. So in the course of my own training, in the course of my own spiritual path, to do my own healing, I came across his work, which is known as somatic experiencing, to try to digest and metabolize some of the difficult, painful experiences that I had growing up as a child, particularly my relationship with my sibling. And so that was a huge support for me. And then what I realized as I started learning more about communication is that our communication habits and patterns, those get encoded in our nervous system. They get wired in. Our brain is constantly learning, and we learn patterns and habits that don't serve us. And so if we're interested in transforming and shifting our communication, we need to begin to learn how to pay attention to and contact these deeper rooted nervous system patterns and habits actually in our body, to feel the swells of aggression or activation or fear, and have the inner resources to allow them to move through and settle. And so that's one of the other key aspects informing the work that I do, and that's threaded throughout the book, is providing tools for managing these the intensity of our emotions and the things that come up.
That requires a lot of compassion and empathy, but most importantly, for ourselves, even or especially when the button is pushed.
Yeah. These tools are as much about transforming our relationship with ourself as they are about our interactions and relationships. I'm so glad that you brought that up, because this is really about our own awareness, and it's meant to be empowering. We reclaim our sense of agency. We reclaim our sense, our right to feel our emotions, to acknowledge our authentic needs and values and life, and our sense, the sense of possibility of being met by life, of being met by others, the awareness that, if this person, if this relationship, if this situation can't get me what I need, I have other choices. When I'm aware of what really matters to me, I can make choices. And even when the world doesn't offer what I'm longing for, internally, I can still find a relationship, as you said, of not only compassion, but also of deeply honoring the truth of our heart. And so if we're in a situation where we're not being met with the respect that we want, or we're not finding that, like, for example, our workplace, if our workplace is not giving us the appreciation or the sense of being valued for what we bring, that's painful, that's hard. But that doesn't mean that we need to question or doubt our own sense of self-worth or value. When we're aware of that need, we can meet it to a certain degree internally.
Thank you.
Yeah.
On that note, what can you tell us about what you learned from Marshall Rosenberg, and tell us about the baby giraffe hat?
The baby giraffe hat. Marshall Rosenberg, may he rest in peace, passed away a couple of years ago, was a huge influence on me, as well as some of my other teachers and mentors. So Marshall Rosenberg was the founder of Nonviolent Communication. And Marshall grew up in Detroit in the 40s and late 30s and 40s. And he lived through the race riots in the early 40s in Detroit. And a couple dozen people in his neighborhood, just a few blocks from his house, were killed. And this had a huge impact on him. He learned at this very young, early age that there are people in this world who might want to harm you physically because of the color of your skin. And then as he grew and went to public school, he experienced a lot of anti-Semitism, physical threats, violence. And so he learned that there are people who might want to hurt you because of your last name or your religion. And so this planted in him a very deep question around why. Why do some people resort to violence when their needs aren't met or when they have strong views, and other people are able to stay connected to the sense of shared humanity and compassion, even in very trying circumstances? Some people feel great joy and delight in giving and sharing with other humans. And so he said, we have these two capacities: on the one hand, to harm, and on the other hand, to help and experience joy and delight. And so this set him out on a journey trying to understand and explore what makes the difference. And one of the things that he found through his study and his research, he was trained as a psychologist. He studied with Carl Rogers, the founder of humanistic psychology. He found that the ways in which we think and perceive and speak play a very big role in determining whether or not we think violence is a viable strategy when push comes to shove, so to speak, and things are hard or our needs aren't being met. And so he named the system of communication that he founded nonviolent communication very consciously to place it in the tradition of Gandhian and Kingian nonviolence, because he saw it not only as a tool for personal transformation, for interpersonal healing and relationship, but also for social change, recognizing that the institutions in our society that cause so much oppression and inequality, those structures come from these concepts in our mind of some people being better than others, and those who are better deserving more, and moralistic judgments of right and wrong, good and bad. And those who are bad, who are wrong, who are evil deserve to be punished, and therefore violence is okay. So this is a very rudimentary analysis of the concepts, but that's the basic angle. So I trained with Marshall and some of the people that he trained, and learned the system of nonviolent communication. And this forms a core part of the book and a core part of the work that I do today. And when one of the times that I met Marshall and trained with him, I asked if I could speak with him about some of the ideas that I had about nonviolent communication, because what I found in myself was that having a meditation practice, knowing about mindfulness, that it was very easy for me to pick up the tools of nonviolent communication because my self-awareness was very clear. So I could do the things that were being suggested fairly easily in terms of tracking and identifying my own internal experience, my thoughts, my emotions, managing them, not getting swept away. Like I had developed all of those capacities. And so it was like somebody pointing out things, and my mind was primed and ripe to take on these different perspectives and tools. So I had breakfast with Marshall and his wife at the end of this one retreat. And I said to him, I said, Marshall, I'm really excited about these tools. And I think that if we could teach people to meditate, if we could teach people mindfulness, they would learn so much faster. And that actually, it seems like it's kind of this missing ingredient in nonviolent communication. If you can't be mindful, it's really hard to use any of these tools. And Marshall paused. And he looked at me and smiled, and he said, I've been trying to teach people how to do that for many years. And he said, I've been using this baby giraffe hat. He uses puppets, a giraffe and a jackal, to talk about our different styles of communication, the more heart-centered communication of a giraffe, and the more blame and judgment-laden communication represented by the jackal. So this baby giraffe hat was his symbol for meditating, for going inside and bringing those qualities of awareness and empathy to oneself. He said, I've been trying to teach people for years how to do that. He said, maybe that's your work to do.
Woohoo!
And so, yeah, woohoo. So I took that as an invitation. And, that was the beginning of, 10 or 15 years of really integrating these different practices and finding where do they fit and how can they support each other.
Beautiful. Thank you. In
Yeah.
one of your chapters, you talk about relational awareness. And in each chapter, there's so many beautiful things, but I'm just going to pull out one thing that just strikes a chord at my heart. And if we did perhaps this one thing, then the whole violence aspect goes away. It's the Zulu greeting, Sawubona.
Yes, Sawubona, we see you. We see you. In South Africa, in Zulu country, this comes to me from a dear friend and colleague who started a meditation center in South Africa. The traditional greeting is Sawubona, which literally translates to "we see you," And the response is, Yabo, Sawabona, we see you too. And it's this deep acknowledgement of seeing one another's humanity. And it's talked about as an agreement. There's this implicit agreement to participate in one another's life. And, as human beings, we have this very deep need to be seen, for recognition, and to know that we matter. And this is one of the key aspects of presence. One of the first foundations and trainings of mindful communication is to learn how to lead with presence, how to really show up in a wholehearted and embodied way with another human being, which is not always easy, because being with another human, particularly in person, embodied, it's a very charged experience. Eye contact for primates, there's a lot going on there.
Oh, yeah.
So, leading with presence, there are many dimensions and aspects to that as I go into in the book, but one of those core aspects is this experience of mutuality, of seeing another person as an autonomous individual with their own feelings and needs and dreams and desires and hopes and fears, just like me. This person wishes to be happy, just like me. This person suffers and longs for things in life. And so if we can begin to find that quality of presence and mutuality, of sawubona, in our relationships, it starts to shift the whole atmosphere and tone of the conversation.
Thank you. I'm kind of blending a few chapters together. There's so much goodness in here. But using sawubona, which is in essence what he did, there's a beautiful story in chapter 5 on Where Are You Coming From about Daryl Davis meeting the KKK.
Yeah, what an amazing story, and what an amazing man. I was moved to tears when I first heard the story. So Daryl Davis, African American, who grew up overseas. I think one of his parents was in the military, and he spent the first few years of his life overseas. And as anyone who's traveled a little bit knows, or read some, the race relations in the United States are very different than the race relations in many other parts of the world. The color of your skin, particularly between being white and being black, is not as sharp of a charged area as it is here in the States, because of the legacy and history of slavery in our country. So he hadn't experienced racism. So they moved to the United States. They were in Boston, and he joined the Cub Scouts, and they had a parade. And he was walking down the street with his troop, only black kid in the troop. And people started throwing bottles and rocks at him. And he couldn't figure out what was going on. At first, he didn't know it was about him, but then he realized that these people hate me and they're trying to harm me. He couldn't make sense of why they might not like him. Yeah. Just because of the color of his skin. He kept saying, but they don't know me. How can they hate me if they don't know me? So again, it's kind of similar to Marshall. This set him on a journey, on a path to try to discover and understand why. Where does this hate come from? So he became a musician, really, really beautiful jazz musician. And he was playing a gig in the Deep South. Can't remember what state he was in, playing a gig at a bar. And afterwards, a white man came up to him and said, you're pretty good for a black man. You play like Jerry Lee Lewis. You're almost as good as Jerry Lee Lewis, who's a white jazz musician. So, Daryl Davis kind of chuckled and smiled. I know Jerry Lee Lewis. And, he learned to play piano from African American musicians. I don't know if you knew that. So the white gentleman didn't know that. He said, "Oh, I didn't know that." So they sit down and start talking and have a drink. Turns out this guy is a member of the Ku Klux Klan, and Daryl develops a relationship with him. And they start, talking, meeting, talking on the phone, getting together, and over time, just through meeting him with this sense of mutuality. Not trying to change his mind, just treating him with respect and kindness and warmth, not contradicting his ideas, just listening and trying to understand. Eventually, the guy starts asking Daryl, well, what do you think about that? Well, what's your perspective on that? Because he was so patient and understanding and kind. And over time, this gentleman ends up realizing that his views aren't in line. Daryl changes his heart, and he gives up his membership in the Ku Klux Klan. And so Daryl started a project. He's writing a book, and he convinced this fellow to introduce him to other members of the KKK. And over the course of his conversations with people in the KKK, he ended up convincing, not through argument, through dialogue and friendship, through sawubona, more than 200 members of the KKK to leave the organization. Not only that, they gave up their robe. They gave him their robes and hoods, many of them. So this is the power of showing up with presence, and also of the second step that I talk about in the book, which you reference, of coming from curiosity and care, of really having a helpful, healthy intention in a conversation, and being able to stay connected to that and create genuine human connection.
Thank you, and thank you for sharing. In that chapter, there's so much good stuff in here, and we won't be able to get through the whole book, which is why people are going to need to get the book. You say if you get only one thing out of this book, enlightened self-interest and coming from curiosity and care. What can you tell us about this?
Yeah. It's one of the most powerful and transformative ingredients in dialogue, is the genuine intention to understand. Because our intention plays a central role in our relationships and conversations. It does a couple of different things. First, so much of our communication is nonverbal, right? So if we're having a conversation with somebody and their words are saying one thing, and their body, their tone of voice, their facial expressions, their gestures are saying something else, we listen to what the body's saying. We don't listen to what the words are saying. And what animates our body language, our tone of voice, our gestures, those subtle micro expressions that are not conscious, what animates all of that is our intention. So our intention is communicating something in the conversation, and simultaneously it's determining the trajectory of the conversation. In Buddhist psychology, intention is the key factor that determines karma. Intention is the volitional motivation, the inclination in the heart, is what sows the seeds for future tendencies and experience from the perspective of Buddhist psychology. So it's this very powerful factor in human consciousness. And so we get a solid dose of conditioning from our society around communication and conflict and difference. And we pick up a lot of default, habitual, learned intentions, particularly whenever there is a disagreement. We have this idea based on past experience for good reason. All right, something's going on. Someone's going to win and someone's going to lose. I know which side I want to be on. I got to make sure I win here, right? And so that stimulates all kinds of unhelpful intentions, trying to win, trying to be right, blaming, judging, protecting, defending, attacking. Those intentions breed mistrust, tension, disconnection, all of the things that are so painful in our life and in our relationships. So one of the things that we practice in our spiritual practice and in our relational awareness practice, in our practice with other human beings, is how to contact and maintain a genuine intention to understand. This is at the core of meditation practice. Our ignorance, when ignorance is running the show, we try to control experience. We want the good stuff and we try to avoid the bad stuff. And anyone who's meditated for 5 minutes knows how exhausting and pointless that is. Go ahead and try to control your mind and see how far you get, right? Even if you can do it for a little while, you burn out of energy, because it's not really possible. So what we train internally in meditation practice is this ability to have an intention to understand rather than to judge, to get curious about our experience and meet it with kindness. And we bring those same intentions into our conversations and relationships. And why that's so powerful is when we're able to come from curiosity and care, when we're able to have this genuine intention to understand, other people feel it. Other people recognize, we're not just trying to steamroll them or get our way or be right. And that creates, there's that word again, that creates the space for us to start to hear one another and work together. So if people take away nothing else from my book, from our conversation, just try practicing bringing forward the intention to understand, this genuine wish to be curious and have a sense of care in your heart, in your relationships and conversations.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. So I got to ask one more story, and it's in this chapter as well. The whole book's great, but we're zeroing in here for some reason. When we talk about meeting with kindness,
yes,
Aikido teacher Terry Dobson, a drunk laborer, and an old man on the subway.
Yeah. Terry Dobson was an ex-Marine, and he was in Japan, and he was studying martial arts with the founder of Aikido. Now, the word Aikido means the way of peace. And his teacher had stressed over and over again, this is an art of peace. This is a way of reconciliation. But Dobson was an ex-Marine. He'd been training in the dojo for many years, and he'd never actually fought in real life. So one day in Tokyo, he gets on the train, and this man stumbles into the train, drunk, large, big, burly guy, a day laborer, and he's cursing and spitting, and he lunges at a woman who's holding a baby, almost hits them. And so inside, Terry Dobson says, here's my chance. I'm going to get to prove, I'm going to get to use my skills finally, and, be the hero who, establishes peace and conquers this, dangerous man. So Terry Dobson calls out to this guy and says, "Hey, over here." So he draws his attention, and now the day laborer starts yelling and shouting and hurling insults at him. And then to provoke him even further, he blows a kiss in his direction. So the day laborer is, zeroing in on him, this, foreigner, calling him names. And just as, Terry says, if he moves one more inch, I'm going to drop him. Just at that critical moment before something happens, he hears a voice from the other side of the train, a very sharp, distinct yell. Someone shouts out, "Hey, come here. Come here, talk to me." And it's this little old man on the other side of the train car. So the day laborer swirls around and says, "Why should I talk to you?" So the old man starts chatting it up. "So what you been drinking?" And he says, "I've been drinking sake. It's none of your goddamn business." And so the old man kind of goes off on the story. Oh, that's wonderful. That's what I love to drink sake. My wife and I, every evening, we drink sake together. We sit out on a little bench in front of a persimmon tree that my father planted many years ago. And the day laborer says, "I love persimmons." And the old man says, yes, of course. And I imagine you must have a beautiful wife too. And so through conversation, the day laborer starts to open up, and he starts crying, and he says, "My wife died. I don't have anybody. I just lost my job. I've got nothing. I'm so ashamed of myself." By the end of the conversation, the day laborer is sitting next to the old man, his head in his lap, crying, and the old man is stroking his hair, stroking his head. And Terry Dobson realized that he had so much to learn about nonviolence and peace, and how to really, really connect. What he had wanted to do, with force and muscle had been accomplished with a few kind words. And he realized that, the essence of this martial art was love. And so this is so much at the heart also of nonviolent communication, is this capacity to see each other's humanity, to recognize that we may disagree vehemently with another's views, another's choices, even another's actions. But when we're able to see in a deeper way, when we're able to see the deeper needs and values and concerns underneath their actions, we can stay connected to their humanity. And that opens up the space for real dialogue and connection.
I've got tears.
Mm.
I've got tears. Thank you,
Mm.
thank you, thank you.
Yeah.
On that note, Oren, what one homework assignment would you give people today so that they start to take action on working on their communication?
Sure, thank you. That's a beautiful invitation, Michael. I'm just going to take there's so much. I want to just take a moment and consider what I wanna offer people. We've talked about a lot, and we talked about pausing, which is a very powerful practice. We talked about the genuine intention to understand and coming from curiosity and care. Either one of those will be transformative for people. But I think what I want to offer is something that we haven't really honed in on yet, because it's at the heart of nonviolent communication, and because it is so empowering and so transformative. And this is the practice of listening for and identifying our deeper human needs and values. And so the understanding here that comes from Carl Rogers and Abraham Maslow, from the forefathers and founders of humanistic psychology, is that as human beings, we're logical creatures. We want to be happy. And that anything that we're doing, anything that we're saying, even anything that we're thinking to a certain degree, in some way, consciously or unconsciously, intentionally or unintentionally, wisely or unwisely, is an attempt to meet some deeper need. And that these deeper needs are universal, that they're shared. And this is not just for things like food, water, shelter, air, but some of the things we've been talking about: the need to be seen, the need to be understood, the need for meaning and contribution and community, the need for play and rest and joy, the need for beauty, for celebration. All of these needs. And so what we can do is we can ask a very simple question and hold this question in our awareness. And that question is, what matters? What matters here? What matters to me? Why am I doing this? Where is this coming from? And for someone else, when someone's speaking, when someone's doing something, what do I think matters to them? What are they after underneath the story, underneath the actions? And what we're doing here is we're looking for the shared humanity. We're looking for what is it that I can actually connect with in the other person? And what is it in myself, if we're doing this exploration internally? What is it in myself that I'm actually longing for? And when we can identify that, even if we can't identify it, just the recollection, the awareness that we are motivated to meet our needs, and the inquiry, okay, what matters here? Just that is transformative, because we start looking and relating in a different way. So if folks want to do some homework, if they want to begin to work with some of this, that's what I would recommend: is throughout your day, as you're going through things, just consider to yourself, what matters? What need am I trying to meet here through this choice or action or thing that I'm saying? And the same thing for others. And that will begin to take you down a road that brings you to a different place and a different perspective.
Woohoo! Jessica, my wife, the producer, she always wants me to ask a question for parents and their kids. What
Yes.
advice would you give parents for their kids in communicating today?
Thank you. This is a rich, rich topic. So the first thing is that the ways that we relate with our children are teaching them lessons all of the time. And when we have a disagreement or a difference with our children, when we use our power over our children, because I said so, this is the way it is, you have to. What we teach them internally, unintentionally, it's tragic, we teach them that the bigger person always wins. And we're starting to set up that pattern of protect, defend, attack, judge, that either or, win or lose. And we also, in some way, sometimes unintentionally communicate your needs don't matter as much as mine. So one of the best things that we can do in using these skills with our children is, when possible, whenever possible, to remember that when we have a disagreement, if we can use that to explore the possibility of collaborating, of understanding, of working together, we're teaching our children one of the most valuable lessons they can learn in life. We're teaching them how to make peace. So, what this means is developing awareness and a language of needs with our children, being able to acknowledge and affirm, inquire, acknowledge, and affirm what is it that our child is needing right now, to actually help them to be aware of their needs. And even if we can't meet their needs, which we can't meet our children's needs all the time. This is one of the most painful things about being a parent. But to acknowledge that, have compassion for ourselves, even if we can't meet our child's needs in the way that the child would want, what we can do is we can acknowledge them. We can help the child to feel seen, to know that they matter, to know that their needs matter to us. And that is essential to give that experience to our children. And then to help the child to understand that we have needs too. And that what we're interested in is working together to hold all of our needs. That's the process of collaboration and communication. And when we force our children to do things, when we place demands on them, we rob them of the opportunity to consider others. Because when a healthy human being is met with demands, you know what we do? We resist, because autonomy is really important to us. So, why do we have this tug of war with our kids all the time? Because they're healthy and they're trying to maintain their autonomy. They're doing exactly what they should do. So instead of placing demands, trying to learn how to speak with a language of needs, this is what's important to me, and here's why, and here's what I'm hearing is important to you, and why. How do we work together? And being really conscious and clear when we use force. Is this about safety? Is this absolutely necessary? Right? And when we start to do that, we open the possibility for our children to start to consider others, to recognize, yes, I have my needs, but you have your needs too, and I want to consider you. Or so one colleague of mine, Inbal Kashtan, who I talk about in the acknowledgments, raised her son with these tools, and the grandparents were over visiting, sleeping downstairs early in the morning, 5 or 6 a.m., and her 3-year-old son is banging on the floor with a stick. Mom wants the grandparents to be able to sleep. So, what's a parent's job? Get the kid to stop banging, right? Well, fortunately, she had some training in nonviolent communication. So she says to her 3-year-old son, "Sweetheart, Grandma and Grandpa are sleeping downstairs. I'm concerned that you're going to wake them up. Would you be willing to bang on the couch instead of on the floor?" Her 3-year-old child says, "I don't want to, but I'm willing to."
Wow.
Mom asks, "Why don't you want to?" "Well, if I bang on the couch, it's not going to wake me up." Right? So he knows what he wants. "Sweetheart, why are you willing to?" "I want to consider you and Grandma and Grandpa." So even very young children can begin to recognize, I have needs and other people have needs, and we can work together.
I'm so glad you shared that story.
Me too.
I am so, so glad. So on that note, where can people go to find out more and to find your beautiful book, Say What You Mean?
Thanks so much, Michael. So 2 places. They can go to my website, orenjaysofer.com, ORENJAYSOFER.com. And if they want a free gift, introductory guided meditation series, plus a short ebook on contemplative practice that I wrote, they can subscribe to my email newsletter. And the simplest way to do that is right through your phone via a text message. So if folks send a text message to the number 44222 with the word guided, GUIDED, like guided meditation, it'll walk them through the steps, and you'll get my guided meditations and ebook. So just text the word guided to 44222.
Fantastic. And if you didn't catch orenjsofer.com, ORENJSOFER.com, or text 44222 and put the word guided in, then come on over to inspirenationshow.com and we'll get you over to orenjsofer.com or texting 44222 and using the word guided. This has been phenomenal, Oren. This has been exceptional. I've really enjoyed your book. What you shared today, it was like pinpoint laser accuracy, going in and giving people some key assistance on something that one would think that we naturally know. There's a reason. but you've given such beautiful guidance today.
Thank you, Michael.
Oh, you are most welcome.
Yeah.
Any last words of wisdom you want to share with people before we do just a really, really brief meditation?
Yeah, sure. Two things. First, I want to thank you. It's been a real pleasure to meet you and have this conversation. So from my heart, genuine thanks to you.
It goes both ways.
Thank you. There are two short things I want to share, and they're connected. One, you said you'd think we'd know this stuff. And what I want to say is we do know this stuff. This stuff is innate. It's intuitive. It's already there in our bones. We just need to be reminded of it and practice it. That's one. But two is the reality check, which is we are up against a lot. We're living in a time in society. We live in a culture that is moving at an unnatural pace. That is unnatural for our organism. We live in a society, in a world that is disembodied, that's focused on virtual reality instead of the real embodied reality. And we live at a time where there is a profound fragmentation of attention because everyone and everything is trying to own and buy our attention through devices, through persuasive technology and design. And so what these tools are about reclaiming our authority and our aliveness, and learning how to return to something more natural, more embodied, more wholehearted, so that we can live the life that we want and have the quality of connection and meaning, not only in our personal relationships, but slowly over time in our society that we value and long for.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Woohoo!
Right on, friend.
Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Oren. Thank you. Would you have time for a very brief meditation?
Sounds great. Perfect. All right, everyone. So just invite you to find a comfortable posture that feels at ease. It's relatively upright. And begin by taking a few slow, deep breaths. Just breathing in through your nose and breathing out through your mouth. Do that 2 or 3 times. And then feel the contact of your body sitting on the chair or the floor, or if you're standing, feel your feet on the floor. See if you can feel the steadiness, that firm support of the ground beneath you. Let your face relax, your eyes, your jaw. Let your shoulders and chest relax, your belly be soft. And then ask yourself this question, just in a very quiet, simple way. What matters to me? What am I longing for? And see what comes. What's important to you in your life right now? Are you needing more space, more downtime? Are you wanting more connection or meaning? Maybe more fun or play? Just listen inside and see what comes. And then whatever you hear, whatever you find, hold that word, that phrase in your consciousness, and see if you can feel or experience even just the slightest taste of it right now, what this means to you. If you didn't already know it, you wouldn't be able to be aware of it. And just breathe as you contact the sense, the flavor of this particular value or need. Feel it in your heart or your body. And as you go off into your day, as you continue, see if you can keep some awareness of this value, of this thing that's so important to you. Keep some awareness inside and look for places, look for ways that you can start to bring more of this into your life.
Pavlovian response. I am so happy you brought the bell.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Oren. You have a huge heart. I don't know how else to put it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Thank you. I feel yours too, Michael. It's a real pleasure to meet you, and I'm really glad that you're doing this show and sharing such wonderful perspectives and tools and ideas with people out there. So much gratitude for you for bringing this stuff out into the world.
And to you as well. And for those who can't see, I'm holding up his beautiful book. Now I'm pawing it.
Yeah. It's a great joy to have it out there. I'm really excited that people get to benefit from the last 20 years of my practice and training with Say What You Mean. So I hope it helps.
I think it will. I know it will. I know it.
Great.
Got to crank it back up for the finish here. So for everyone out here, I can do better than that. So for everyone out here. I'm blissed out by the meditation. So for everyone out there, this is Michael Sandler saying, be well, have fun, say what you mean, and begin communicating better today and shine bright. Woohoo! Thank you so much, my brother.
Sweet. You're welcome. Thank you for just such a lovely, easeful, flowing conversation. I feel like you set me up for success. You were just throwing me lob balls I could just knock out of the park. So yeah, huge gratitude to you.
Then I did my job, and a huge gratitude to you as well.
Sweet.
Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like below. Also leave your comments. Have some real fun with it. Subscribe to our channel where you're going to get more great videos, more interviews coming up. And check out our website, inspirenationshow.com. That's where you'll find tips, blogs, information, videos you won't find anywhere else, and useful and helpful resources to really help you kickstart your life and to shine bright. Thanks so much again. Thank you for your support. Like, comment, subscribe. See the website. Thanks so much and have fun. Of course, shine bright. Woohoo!